Well, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm back, and I hope you guys are doing fantastic out there. In this video, we're going to talk about another Coleman stove. This is model 425F. I picked this up for 15 bucks. Now, I know you can see right here, it's got a price tag that says 20. But I'm so excited because these stoves are not cheap. We're going to go through this stove today, and yeah, there you can see the price tag, $15. We're going to go through this stove today and see if it works, what's the date of this stove, and things like that. So let's get started. I'm excited about this one. So right here, you can see some of the tools that I have ready to use on this stove. I don't know exactly what I'm going to need, but this is a good way to start. So I have a large crescent wrench, I have a medium-sized channel locks, I have a flathead screwdriver, I have a small Phillips screwdriver, a small crescent wrench, I have some steel wool 4/0, a flashlight, I have some fingernail polish, which you don't have to have that, I just use that. And then over here I have a small socket set that's 1/4 inch drive. So the first thing that I look at generally is the case. I want to make sure that the case is in good condition. I check the butterfly valve and see if it's in good condition. There's a screw there that we could use, and then there's two 7/16 nuts that we could need to use. But on the back of this model, we can see the numbers 987. This is September of 1987 is the date stamp of this stove. So I'm going to open it up, make sure the flaps are good. Obviously you can see that this stove needs a pretty good cleaning, but that's something different. I'm just worried about getting the stove running in this video here today. So I'm looking at the burners, I'm looking at the tank. All of the magic, for the most part, is in this tank. Okay, the pump, the valve, the cap. Those are the major things. And this fuel tank is one of the newer ones, because it's got the cap on the side instead of the end. So I can hear that it has fuel in it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little bucket and I'm going to dump that fuel out. So we're going to take this cap off. And when I took the cap off just now, I could hear pressure. So that's a good sign. I'm looking at the washer on the cap, and it doesn't look very good. So it's probably going to need a new cap, but that's no problem. I always look around the fill here and I make sure that the tank doesn't have any pits or anything in that area. And let's take a quick look at this portion of the stove. I want to make sure that everything in here is fairly clean so it can probably function. So what I like to do is take an air gun and shoot air up in this, I think they call this a manifold. I like to shoot air in here and make sure that these burners are clear inside, because sometimes you get spiders, they'll crawl through the little holes here on the side, and then once they get inside of here, they'll crawl up in here and they'll make their little webs, and you'll get mud daubers that'll go in there. So it's really important to make sure that all this is clear. In the event that you need to take these burners apart, it's just a flathead screw and it's pretty straightforward. But from my experience, I don't see the need to get into those burners very often. It's actually pretty rare. I only do that when I notice a stove that's not performing as good or something like that. I just want to make sure that I get plenty of air through there. I can feel a lot of air coming out of that burner, and if I open this butterfly valve over here, I'm going to try to see if I can feel any air here. Yeah, I can't. So that's a pretty good indication that this thing is fairly clean. There's a spider right there. in the bottom. I just blew him out of there. It's funny that I mentioned that because I just saw one. He's hanging out right there. So that's exactly what I was talking about. They like to crawl up in there and then they hide and make their nests and stuff. So it's good to get these things cleared out and get all those critters out of your stove. You don't want them in there. We'll go ahead and start right here with the pump. I want to see what the pump looks like. So I'm going to pull this little ring off. Let's pull that bad boy off. Generally, if I have channel locks, I'll take that little ring and I'll kind of smash it down a little bit to give it a little bit more compression for when I put it back. So once I take that little ring off, I can pull this pump and cup out. So as you can see, this is the new style pump cup. It's not leather, it's the rubber one. I personally like the leather ones better. Yeah, I like them other ones better. I like leather pump cups. But I'm just going to clean this and make sure that it's not damaged or anything like that. And so far, everything looks good with that pump cup. No problem. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take out this air stem and take a look at that, make sure that it's clean. I don't see no problems with that. This is your check valve removal tool. You'll have two different stems that have different threads. So you want to match up which thread fits your air stem. So obviously you can see it's not this one, it's this one. So what we'll do is we'll center that right down in the middle like we're trying to hit a bullseye. We'll put it right down in there into the check valve and we'll thread this in. Then we'll take this part of the tool, which looks like a flathead screwdriver, and we'll put that around there and we'll just get it right on top of that check valve. From here, I'm going to put my little washer and my little nut on there. We'll tighten these down. Doesn't have to be gorilla tight. We're just going to snug this up. And then we'll take a larger crescent wrench and go counterclockwise and break that check valve open. From here you can just remove the tool, unthread this, and the check valve will be attached to the tool. So right now we're looking to see how clean this is. Does it have oil on it? Is it dirty? And in our case, this check valve is pretty dirty. So we're going to clean it up with a rag. Nothing too crazy. If you want to soak this like in citric acid or boiling citric acid or something like that, you can. That'll help clean it up. But I'm not going to do all that. I'm just going to take it off the tool here. And I want to make sure that this check valve is clear. I'm listening for that ball. So the ball makes a good sound. Now what's important about these check valves is you want to make sure the air does not go this way towards the flathead portion of it. Okay, so air can go this way, but you don't want air coming back. So what I like to do is I like to shake it and listen for the little ball. Hopefully you can see that. You can see that little stainless steel ball. But I'll put this against my lips and I'll try to blow air through it. If you can't blow air, it's good. If you can blow air a little bit, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you can take a tiny punch, put it inside up against that ball and give it a little knock, and sometimes that'll reseat that stainless steel ball and make the check valve work again. But in our case, this thing is not letting me blow air, so it's good to go. Sometimes you can spray these down with WD-40 and things like that. I know that you see this and it looks like a flathead screwdriver will pull them out, and there's a lot of people that have done that, including myself. But honestly, this tool makes good work of removing these check valves, especially if you're going to be working on a lot of Coleman products. Because even on this one, you can see that it's a little chewed up from where people have removed it with a screwdriver before. So we'll put this back on the tool, just like that. We'll tighten everything. I gotta tighten this thing back down. We'll get it nice and secure on the tool. It does a good job holding everything together so that you can put the check valve in as a single unit. And it's a lot less play and stuff going on. You can spray like carburetor cleaner on here and stuff if you want to clean this up, but we're not going to do that today. Another thing that I want to look at real quick while I'm in here is on the tank. I want to look inside, and wow, you can see a lot of oil and a lot of dirt, but I'm looking at the outside of where the pump cup comes into contact with the tank, and I'm looking to see if there's any scratches or burrs or anything like that, and there's not. Another thing you can do is kind of feel with your finger. You can just kind of reach your finger in there, and if it's smooth, you're pretty much good to go. I don't feel any dirt or debris or anything like that, so it feels okay. At this point, we're going to go ahead and put the check valve back in. I'm going to use some fingernail polish on the check valve threads, and you don't have to do this. This is just something that I do. I think that it makes a better airtight seal. Maybe it does nothing, but I believe that it works, so I do it. So we'll go ahead and set that aside, and we will now put the check valve in, and then we'll thread that bad boy in. And then once we get it hand tight, then we'll get our large crescent wrench one more time, and we'll give it just a little bit of a snug. It doesn't have to be gorilla tight. This is a brass piece, and so you don't want to over tighten it. Now we'll remove our nut and our washer, and then the tool itself, and then the stem. We'll remove all this, and I'll go put this back in the toolbox. I want to start looking at some of this stuff here. I want to make sure that this valve is able to be turned. I'm looking for any signs of fuel leakage around any of this area, and I don't see any, so that's actually a good sign. If you see any kind of fuel leakage around this area, we can tighten this nut a little more. There's a packing, a graphite packing in there, and if you tighten against that graphite packing, it'll grab this valve stem a little bit more. But it feels okay for now. And the next thing I want to check is the lighting lever. I want to make sure that that thing goes up and down smoothly, and in our case, it looks good. So we're going to go ahead and take the nut off right here. We're just going to pop this loose. Take this nut off. We're also going to open this valve. We just want to see what this looks like. This thing feels like it's gummed up. So I don't know if it's been cross-threaded or if it's got a bad packing. I don't know what the case is, but it's kind of tight getting that thing off here. Usually you can get them hand tight and they'll come right off. So somebody might have put maybe Loctite on it or something at some point. So we're going to pull out this needle, and what's really important is the tip. Make sure that the tip of this needle is not getting broken or damaged. Also, you want to look at the stem itself, the whole needle as a whole itself, and if there's any carbon buildup in this area, you want to remove any of that carbon that might be present. So to do that, that's what I use the steel wool for. I'll just put it and I'll wrap the steel wool around it, and I'll just pull this away, and I'll keep the steel wool stationary. Because you don't want to take any risks to damaging that needle. So we're just going to kind of pull that thing a few times. You want to make sure that all that carbon buildup comes off. And this needle, this stem is a little bit bent, and these things are really fragile. They can be damaged easily, so you want to be careful when you're dealing with this portion of the stove. In the event that you get one of these stems that's bad, they do unthread from the valve itself, so you can take them off, but really there's no need to do that right now. This one feels okay. so I think it's going to be usable. I'll set that aside in an area where it's not going to be damaged. Next thing that we want to do is we want to take a look at the generator. We're going to start here at the tip of the generator, and we're going to put our crescent wrench on there, and we're just going to pull that tip off. Sometimes if you're using dirty fuels, or maybe if you bought a stove kind of like what I did and you don't know what the history of it is, sometimes you got to tear this thing apart and see what's going on in there. You don't know what kind of fuel they used or how good they cared for their stove. So that's why, that's one of the reasons anyway why I pull this thing apart, because I want to see what things look like. And inspect it, make sure everything looks okay there. So far so good. We'll set that aside, and I'll paint a tiny little mark. That's just to remind me which side of the generator takes this, because I'll forget. So at this point I'm going to take my channel locks and I'm going to remove this generator tube. And if you make marks or something on the generator, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a pipe. So we just want to remove the pipe from the valve. There we go. Now, this is a good sign. I just saw that spring came out freely. That's a good sign. We want that spring to be able to go all the way through. Sometimes they'll go all the way through, sometimes they don't. In this one, what we want to look for is we want to look down in there and see if you can see daylight through there, through the other side. And you're looking at the side of the walls of the pipe of the generator to see if there's any carbon buildup in there. And I don't see any. If you have any buildup inside of this generator tube, you can run like a rifle brush. Generally a 22 caliber brush works pretty good on these generators. Another thing that you want to look at is the spring here and see if there's any carbon buildup. And if there is, you can run it through your steel wool just like this and twist it and try to get rid of any of that carbon buildup. Another technique that you can use for cleaning these generator springs is you can set them flat on a bench and use a brass brush against them, and you can remove any debris. But this thing is actually pretty clean. This generator looks pretty good, so I don't see any major problems here. Just want to make sure that it's clean. So we'll put the spring back in, and we'll just paint the tip here, and we'll put that nozzle back on. Now that we know that the generator looks okay, we're just going to paint these threads. Like I said, it's just something that I like to do. One thing that you want to make note of is if you ever have a stove that has fire coming out of this area, you might want to either tighten the nozzle or do what I'm doing with the paint. Put the little bit of paint on it, and then that'll help keep it from having flames come out of that area. It's going to burn off anyway, but it'll just make it a little bit better. So the next part of the stove that we want to look at is the actual valve itself. Okay, as we can see, the lighting lever is moving very free, which is a good sign. We don't have no problems there. And inside of here there's another graphite packing, and in the event that you see any sign of leakage around this area, you can tighten this nut and it'll tighten that packing, and it'll make the lighting lever a little harder to turn, but it'll seal it up. But I'm not going to mess with that unless I see any signs of leakage around there. So I don't see that, so I'm not even going to mess with that. The next thing is taking this out of the tank. The best way that I've found to take this out of the tank is to put it in a vise against this portion right here and then twist the tank off of the valve. That's usually how I do it. But if you have a large wrench available, you can try this first instead of heading over to the vise if you want to save yourself a trip from going over to the vise. So I'm going to give it a shot and see maybe if I can break this loose. be careful here because you don't want to slip and damage the threads. You know, if your crescent wrench slips, you're going to damage that brass. So in our case, I was able to get a turn on it, so it looks like we'll be able to do it right here on the bench, and we're not going to need to go to the vise. We're going to take this out. This is also a tapered thread. Look at how dirty that is. That's that air pickup tube. That thing is dirty. Couple things that we want to look at here. See that hole in the bottom portion there? What we want to see is when we operate the lighting lever and we put it in the up position, we should see that little stud come through. See that little bar goes through there and it closes that hole. And then when we put the lighting lever down, that should get out of the way. So the way these work is when the lighting lever is up, it puts that little piece in the way of allowing liquid in, so it'll draw from this hole, which is going to draw vapor. And then once you get the stove primed, meaning the blue flames, you can put the lighting lever down and it allows liquid fuel to come into the system. So we're going to go ahead and pull this part off real quick, if I can get a good hold of it. And we're going to inspect it real quick since we're in here. We just want to make sure that that little rod is okay, in good condition, and that this hole is clear. So we're good there. Also want to make sure that this is not clogged, this little hole right here. So we'll just clean up these threads a little bit, and I'm going to put my lips against this and I'm going to plug the bottom and I'm going to blow air, and hopefully I'll feel the air coming out of this hole. We had plenty of air coming through that hole, so we know that that's good to go. There's nothing else really that we need to look at. So at this point, I'm going to put this back together and put it right back into the stove. We're going to paint just the threads. Be careful not to get any paint, especially over that hole there. Don't want to restrict any airflow. So we'll just be real careful putting that in there, and then we'll tighten that down. And now we know that everything is good to go. And before we put this back in the stove, we want to just check and make sure, once again, just verify that that little stud comes out. So from here, it's ready to go back in the tank. I'm going to put my famous fingernail polish on it. It's probably not necessary because this is a tapered fitting. For me, it's probably like the placebo effect. It's probably something that I think works, and it's probably actually doing nothing. But in my mind, I believe that it's helping reduce the flow of air through the threads. So in my mind, it works. Now we'll drop that back down, and then we'll tighten this bad boy up. Make sure you don't cross thread. There we go. Got the thread started. Now when we end up, we're going to want the lighting lever on this side right here by my finger. So I just kind of twist it around until I start feeling a little bit of tension, and I'm feeling just a little bit. And so now I'm just going to make one little turn until this is lined up. This doesn't have to be like gorilla tight. I know some people think, oh, it's not tight enough, let's tighten the crap out of it. It doesn't really have to be, in my opinion. So from here, we're going to put the generator back on. Let's go get some more of that world famous fingernail polish. So we got that. Now we'll put this right in here. Sometimes starting these threads is a little bit funny and they can cross thread easily. So be really patient right here. You're dealing with a steel pipe and a brass thread, so you don't want to get crazy when you first start this. You want to make sure that you're not cross-threading, that you're not forcing it, and you'll know when it's correct and when it's not. And I can feel that it's right. So tighten it up by hand, get it nice and snug, as good as you can get, and then come on over here put your wrench on this end right here, and as you tighten this, it's going to tighten against this, and eventually it's going to tighten it down here. So everything will kind of come together. And you want to tighten this up a little bit. You don't want it crazy tight, but you want to get it nice and snug. Let's go ahead and put this stem back in, and be very careful with the needle. When you first insert it, that needle is very delicate and you don't want to damage it. So we're just going to put that in and start threading this. You've got the nut and you've got the packing in there, so you want to kind of tighten this down. What we're feeling for right now is exactly that word, fill. This is by fill. This doesn't have to be tightened real heavy. We want to tighten it to fill. So I'm going to put my wrench on there and just keep filling it. As we compress that nut, it compresses that packing against this stem, and it'll tighten how tight this valve turns. So far so good. We're just going to keep checking it. But if you see any signs of fuel leakage anywhere around this area right here, you tighten this packing a little bit. And if that does not fix your leak, you might need to replace that graphite packing. Oh yeah, that's good right there. That has plenty of tension on it. Yeah, I like that. That feels good. We can put the air stem back in, so we're going to aim right towards the center of the check valve like we're trying to shoot a bullseye, and then we'll put the air stem in. And then from here, we'll put the pump and the pump cup through. Make sure that you don't damage the pump cup. So I kind of twist it and flop it around until it gets in there. So once you get that, then you can put your cap back on, and then your little keeper can go back on. So just like that. And then get my little screwdriver and find this other side right here. Come on. There we go. Now at this point, I'm going to put some fuel in here. I'm going to be using standard unleaded gasoline. And remember, this cap was a little damaged, so I'm going to use a new washer. This is a 3/4 inch washer with a 5/16 hole, and it's an 1/8 of an inch thick. I'm just going to pack that in to my cap, and this is going to be a good temporary solution for getting this stove going. This is not something that I would recommend for long term. It's good for temporary though. And I think that's going to work just fine for us. And I'm going to put a drop or two of oil right in that little hole. You can also put it on the stem if you want. And with this valve closed, I'm going to go ahead and pump this stove up. So let's give it about 30 pumps or so, something like that. At the very end, you want to see if there's pressure pushing back against your thumb. If the thing is rising like this, if you make that last pump and it's kind of coming back against you, you need to check your check valve. But in our case, it was good to go. So we're going to wipe off the excess oil, lift our lighting lever up, and now we're ready to put this thing together and start the stove. Put these two little arms in place. Make sure the lighting lever is up. We'll get our spark lighter ready, making sure that this butterfly valve over here for the auxiliary burner is closed. Now we'll open the valve a little bit. We'll introduce a little bit into the system, and we'll try to give it a light. There we go. Now we'll just let that thing kind of warm up. What we're looking for is blue flames. And once we see good blue flames, then we can put the lighting lever down. You'll see some more yellow flames, and then you can see that this thing needs more air pressure. So I'm going to go ahead and pump it a little bit. Now you can see the flames kind of separating away. That's okay. We can turn that down and get this thing into control. Now as you can see, we've got a burner that's working pretty good. Let's test the auxiliary over here. There we go. And everything's looking good. Let's open that up. Yeah, I've got excellent flame control. You see the flame separating a little bit, so we can turn this down. We've got a little bit too much coming through. See how it closed it? It came close. That's good. We got that going on for us. So everything's working pretty good so far. I got plenty of pressure in there. Now I want to do a quick boil test. I want to see how long this stove takes to boil 1 liter of water. So we'll get that. We're going to take 1 liter, 32 ounces of water, and we'll bring it up to a rolling boil and see how long it takes. So we'll set that right there, turn this up, and we will start the timer. How long is it going to take to boil 32 ounces of water with this stove? Okay, we're getting pretty close. We're 4:17. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the time right now. Just shy of 4.5 minutes. We got a good heavy rolling boil. So that stove works absolutely fantastic. Let's light this auxiliary. We'll put that over there and let it simmer a little bit. Test the simmering ability. Check the flame control, make sure the flame control is good. I mean, obviously you can see we reached a good boil. The burner is working so well. So folks, that's about it for this one. We have another successful Coleman repair, model 425F. Once again, 15 bucks is what I paid for this stove. If you look at the Coleman website right now, a stove like this is over $100 easily. I looked at them today. In fact, the Powerhouse dual, or not the Powerhouse, but they had a dual fuel. I think it's a 424, 425, so very comparable to this stove. They run $189 right now. So I want to say thank you guys for joining me today on this video. If you're curious about the colored flames still showing a little bit of orange, the only thing I can think is there's probably still rust in the tank and I couldn't get all of the fuel out. So when I run a tank or two of fuel through this, those orange flames will go away. It doesn't really bother me. It's cosmetic because 4 minutes, under 4.5 minutes to boil 1 liter of room temperature water. The stove is performing absolutely fantastic. So folks, I want to say thank you for joining me today on this video. I hope that it was useful for you. I hope you got some good, useful information out of it. Please feel free to leave the comments down below. Like this video, share this video. If you like the type of content that you find and see on my channel, please hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. I would appreciate that, and you'll be notified whenever I upload new content. I've got over 1,800 videos on my channel, so please make sure you're checking all the playlists and go all the way back and watch everything you want. I'd appreciate that as well. So with all that being said, folks, I hope you guys have a beautiful day. We'll see you on the next one. I'm really happy right now. There's just something about listening to that sound of a Coleman stove, and it brings back so many good childhood memories of my youth, and it's something that I'll never forget. And that's probably why I'm such a connoisseur and love working on stoves so much because it touches my heart every time I do it. So we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now, everybody.